Welcome to Around the Fence Post, where grit meets growth, stories spark change, and real conversations build stronger farms and futures.
So I'm excited for this. This is a question that I get. People have been asking a lot of questions on the where we go, and I'm getting ready to get into our start part. But I'm getting so many questions, so many consistent phone calls on, hey, what route do we go? What do you think about this? And I appreciate that, with what you're doing and the videos that you sent me when we first connected, the education side, you can tell means a lot to you as well as it does to me. So I appreciated that part a lot. But we'll get into it. So welcome back to Around the Fence Post. Today we've got the guest we've all been waiting on, talking about biologicals. We've got Brady Krchnavy, and I'm very excited to get his takes on biologicals. He's got a company out of, I just went blank on North or South Dakota.
Way up in North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Yep.
And we are going to be talking about his program with MycoMax and his environmental foliar feed, which is called Bionic. And he's going to talk to us about how it would fall into best case usage on a forage world instead of just the row crop guys. So I'm really excited about this. Brady, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Man, right off.
Cushy chair like you have over there.
Hey, I'm telling you, this thing is about worn out and still very comfortable. I'll try not to move it too much. I know it can get distracting. I get the twisting a little bit. Tell me a bit of your story. Let folks get to know you a bit. Brady, you've shared with me some, but you've been in this field for over, a decade and a half at this point.
Yep. I've been doing this a long time. I guess to bring it back, I grew up farming in southeastern North Dakota. So I was a farm kid driving tractor when I was 6, 8 years old, driving trucks when I was 10. So it's in my blood, and it was always a passion of mine, right? We were one of them farms back in the late 80s, early 90s, kind of like today where, fertilizer prices were high, commodity prices were low, and we ended up not making it. And that was always kind of a chip on my shoulder that I lived with, because you grow up on a farm, you think you're always going to be farming, right? So that's kind of the chip I ran around life with. I did the college thing and this and that, but I always was looking for an avenue for ag and to really help farmers, and not only farmers, but the small farmer, right? The guy that, every year it seems like it's a struggle, to get, whether it be more land or whatever it may be, right? Always a struggle. So that was kind of my passion, and I was actually managing a radio station at the time, and I came across this little booth in the corner, and it said mycorrhizal fungi on it, and I went, okay. I thought I've heard of every foliar feeding and every fertilizer and all this stuff. I've always kept up on it. What the heck is this stuff, right? And this was almost 20 years ago now, but I started looking into it. I was not trained in school in soil biology or soil science or anything like that. It was more business management and that type of thing, but being on a farm, you understand soil, right? You understand that's a pretty important thing, right? So got to looking into it, actually took some online courses, soil biology, soil science, learned how soil functions, learned how it's supposed to work, and went, wait a minute, we're missing something in agriculture, and I think this biology piece is it. And the more I learned, the more I went, the fungi world is really where we're lacking, because it is much more fragile than the bacteria world. Tillage, anhydrous, chemicals, all these things kill the fungi, and when you look at your soil, you're supposed to be 50-50 bacteria, fungi. Most of them we start working with right now, 90-95% bacteria. The fungi is gone, right? So that's kind of how it all started. I took some of their product that they had. I tested it on my farm, well, at my cousin's farm, and now we tested it, and I seen results. I seen bigger roots. I went, okay, there's something to this, right? I need to really focus in on this and see where we can go with this, because this is really going to help every farmer, right? So that's really how it all started, and then it was just a matter of finding labs and stuff like that. But that's really my background and how it all began.
And I wasn't even going to ask about that today, but that was a question that I was asked on this stuff not long, was about the labs for doing it. And I think that's really important to note, about the purity of the product that you're trying to make sure of, because and I'll quote last week's podcast guest talking about inoculants, but it's almost, and you can please weigh in on your thoughts on this, but some of these companies are essentially peeing in a bathtub and putting it out there and calling it a good product,
Right.
where you're coming back and saying, hey, I couldn't find a lab that I was happy with until I found these guys, and that's why we have
Right.
the option. So if you can give me a run through that.
And I do think that in the biological world, whether it be bacteria, fungi, quality control, it's the Wild West, right? Nobody really checks it. Nobody knows how to see if there's actually these species and these spores. And so what I wanted to do, or what we did, was we took soil samples from Mexico, North America, into Canada, found out which kind of mycorrhizal fungi are out there and which ones are native, right? Because we don't want to be putting in some species from India or Israel. I know there's some fun that they come from over there. I mean, these guys ship in fungi all the time, and who knows if they're making them in a bathtub. I have no idea, but that's beside the point. But so once we did that, I had to figure out, well, which ones are going to work on the crops we grow, right? So we did that with our corn, our cotton, our peanuts, tobacco, whatever, up to your row crops, your beans and corn and small grains and your wheats and oats and barleys and everything, right? So that's how we made our 8-species blend. Okay, so we have an 8-species blend that works on the crops we grow, right? Because if it didn't work, what's the point of having it, right? So then it was a matter of who's going to make this, right? I ended up finding a lab because I wanted each species to be grown in its own greenhouse, right? So now we have like 16 greenhouses. They all have their own species. And if I have an orchard in Florida call me, I can make an orchard product for them. If I have a turf company in California call me, I can make a turf product. Obviously, we have the 8-species for the crops, right? So I can blend and make what companies need, depending upon what if it's an almond tree in Arizona, I can make a product for that too. So that's the key to me is quality first. A lot of companies will just throw a bunch of bacteria and fungi together, grow it, throw it in a bag, and say, "Here, this is what we got." You don't know. All of our stuff comes with a certificate of analysis, so it shows right on there. It went through a third-party lab. Says this is what's in it. And if you compare that with our label is actually very low compared to what you actually get in the product. So we go above and beyond. Quality control is good for our top priority because I don't want to sell dead bugs. I don't want to sell bugs in a jug or snake oils or any of that, but we get misnomered at all the time. So that was one of my keys is I want a good quality product. I bring it in fresh every spring that's not sitting in a warehouse for a year where you're getting half the efficacy out of it, right? So a lot of little things that go into it, but if you really do it, you can really make a good product.
That was a good thing to note too. You had mentioned they've got a pretty good shelf life, but not if they sit the entire time in the warehouse before the farmer gets it.
Right.
That kind of kills the whole idea of how much time you have out of it.
And I think that's really where the bugs in a jug or the dead bugs or whatever came from. Is if you go out the first spring and you got them fresh and you put them in the ground and you see a difference, well, maybe a bunch of that product got set in a warehouse for a year, right? And then the next spring you put it in and you're like, whoa, I didn't get near the response I did the year before. Well, guess what? Half your bugs probably came out of dormancy and basically died. That's just the world of biology. So that's why ours are fresh. We bring them in fresh every spring.
Explain I'm going to say it wrong, and I've got it. I had it right. Explain the mycorrhizal. Yeah, mycorrhizal fungus or fungi. Can you explain that?
Okay, so we specialize in that mycorrhizal fungi, which is arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, okay? Because there's different mycorrhizal, there's thousands of species of mycorrhizal fungi. We specialize in the arbuscular because what they do is they're a soil microbe. When you put your seed in the ground and their spores right there next to the seed or on the seed, they will go inside that root system upon germination and basically grow. They're called hyphae, but I call them hairs, and they will form a living extension of your root system. So I turn this tiny little root system into this great big root system in 1 year, right? Now with that comes a lot of soil health. It pulls a lot of carbon into the soil. A lot of guys are into that. It does so many things. So making that big root system, then what can we get? They go out there, they're finding phosphorus and nitrogen and potassium. Your big ones. They're also finding all the micronutrients and bringing it back to the plant, right? So what can we do if we get a good amount of fungi in our soil? Fertilizer prices, right? They're so we can drop that fertilizer bill. Like, these guys will go out, unlock the phosphorus that's in our soil. Okay, so there's so many things they do in our soil that can help us. There's 3,000 pounds of phosphorus in the average American farmland per acre. Why don't we use some of that in years like this? And if we, they say it's P1, P2, and some are tied up. This is available. Well, if you've got good mycorrhizal fungi, it's all available. That's the only thing causing our tie-ups in our soil. We don't have the right microbes to unlock them. Okay, that is it. So we are going above and beyond right now, looking at hundreds of species of different bacteria, fungi, whatever, and figuring out if your soil, and this is something new that's coming in a couple months here. We're working on DNA analysis in our soil. Okay. We're going to be able to go into your soil in your backyard and say, hey, this all looks pretty good, but you're low in this bacteria and this fungi, and that's why you're getting this, IDC, or you're getting these issues, whatever it might be, right? So we're going to put this back in your soil, this bacteria back in your soil, so this all functions correctly, right? So that's coming, and it will be where we can actually grow your native species from your field, put it back in your field the next spring.
That's an incredible breakthrough on that.
Yeah.
This is something that I'm a little bit ashamed I haven't thought of yet. I know there was some talk especially in the YouTube video that I do have, still pulled up actually, I watched it probably 4 times, but where the weeds will get weaker, the ones that will kind of be countered, they'll weaken because you're drawing that to the actual plants that need those nutrients. My question is, with the root system knitting together based on the video I saw of how thick those roots will grow and that fungi will go across there, is there any chance of weed suppression through that?
Oh, 100%. Most of the weeds we have a problem with, and you can include water hemp and Palmer amaranth and all these ones that are getting to be resistant, they're non-mycorrhizal. Okay, there's some crops we grow that are non-mycorrhizal, like a turnip, any kind of beets, anything in the brassica family, canola, mustard. They're in the brassica family. They cannot use these spores to make their roots bigger, right? All of the weeds we have a problem with, besides wild oats and something like that, they are non-mycorrhizal. They can't, when we put these spores in the ground, they can't use them to boost their root system. So what happens when it rains and when we put fertilizer down? We get less leaching. We get that fertilizer to our plant and not to the weed, right? We've done this plenty of times. You treat one half of the field versus the other half. You look at one half of the field and you can see weeds coming up and they're getting tall and robust. That's the untreated side. You go to the other side, they're not as big. They're weaker and they're smaller, but there's the same number of weeds per square foot. They're just weaker and smaller because your crop is starving them basically, and they can be killed a lot easier. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree, and I think you did a really good job of explaining that in the video, and I think it's just spot on. It's fascinating on that idea of being able to simply starve it out. So it's almost like it's going to sound really cynical to call it like this, but like when you have a twin and the one twin gets all the nutrients and the other twin doesn't, and that's what happens.
Right.
So those are things. I want to touch on one other thing while I have branched off into the forage side, and that is, on a year like this, the whole country's dry. One of my favorite visuals in that video was the cactus, and you talked about it could have the mycorrhizals run all the way back to the mountains to be drawing water.
Yep.
Would you mind exploring that conversation a little bit?
Yep, for sure. No, if you look at the rainforest, right? Never been tilled and hydrous chemicaled. It's been there forever. There is mycorrhiza under that forest floor running for many, many, many miles. One plant could share nitrogen with a plant that's 2 miles away and vice versa, and back and forth with nutrients and water and this and that. That's how a rainforest works. Now you look at a cactus that's out in the desert, that's undisturbed again, on any chemicaling or tilling or none of the stuff we do. Mycorrhiza grows a life cycle of the plant. So if that plant's going to grow for 200 years, that mycorrhiza is going to grow for 200 years, right? If that plant is put in the spring and is harvested in the fall, well, that's the life cycle of the plant, right? So 100% could have and that's how plants live in the desert. They have to have that network underground. We found mycorrhiza in spots that are 30 feet down, right? And it's probably drawing up water at that point, right? They have a PSI of 1200. Your normal root has a PSI of 250 to 300. They're going to get places your root can never go, right? So think about that. So, and they're much smaller and thinner. They're just little tubes, and they're out searching for nutrients to send to the plant. The plant sends starches and sugars down to them and keep them growing. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the two. Now you think about, well, we harvest the corn in the fall and then it's done. Well, yeah, you're right, but all them little hyphae, them little tubes, they're full of spores. So if we don't go in and tear up our soils, next year's crop can go in there and use those spores to go into their root system, boost their root system. It's a cycle. We have just, with our farm practices, killed it out over the last century and whatever of tillage and whatnot.
Talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Well, I think, you look at, I can look out my office window and it's just black dirt up here in North Dakota. Everybody wants it black because we want the heating units, we want the soil to warm up so we can start planting, right? So what do we do every fall? We till and we till and we till until it's black, right? And to break up that soil every time, because that mycorrhiza in there, that's what gives you the structure, the tilth, the health per se in your soil. So if we're breaking that up, it's windy out today and there's soil blowing across the roads. I mean, literally blowing across the roads because there's nothing holding it, right? So that's where your soil health comes from. Now, I have a little bit different take on that, right? You want that good structure and tilth in your soil, and that's what they call soil health. But what that comes down to is a good amount of fungi and bacteria, a good microbiome. That's healthy to me, okay? A good functioning soil where your bacteria is out there breaking down nutrients into plant usable. It's eating organic matter, making it plant usable. Everything we put in the ground, manure, fertilizer, whatever, has to be broken down by bacteria. I call them the converters. They're converting that into plant usable. The mycorrhiza goes out and gets it and brings it to the plant. That is a fully functioning, healthy soil. Okay? So that's what I think you should strive for, is to have a good level of bacteria and fungi to make that soil function.
So are you a proponent of being 100% no-till, or do you think
100% I am, but I'm in North Dakota. You can't do that. You'd never get in the field. You'd never get something planted. It'd be prevent plant every year, because if you don't get some black up there to dry it out, it's not going to work. Now, what I tell my guys is, if you're going to till, don't till as deep. Okay, let's till down 3, maybe 4 inches, right, instead of 7 or 8 inches. Okay, because if mycorrhiza lives in that top 7, 8, 9, 10 inches, let's not tear it all down. Let's leave it down there, because then next year when we put a crop in, there will still be spores down there, right? So
Yeah.
you don't want to tip them all up, because the UV light kills them. So that's why tillage is bad. Anhydrous is bad on everything. The chemical end and the fungicides and all those back in the day, yeah, we wreaked havoc on our microbes, put it that way.
So I guess the first thing that was coming to my mind, with a little bit along the lines of, I like to do things a little bit holistically without being wholly no-till or wholly tillage. Not a fan of both all the way. But we have a dairy farm, we're around, I've got a pocket of dairies around, and then of course I grew up in that community, so we have a lot of manure injection, a lot of that type of stuff. So that's what I was asking about. If you can inject that manure, those fungi should really be eating, going to town on that manure, I would assume.
You put the manure down there, the bacteria is going to go in there and eat it. It's going to convert it into plant usable. The mycorrhiza is there to take and run right off the plant, go find it, bring it back to the plant. It's a whole cycle, right? So I love manure way more than I like the other options, put it that way. But we got to have the right bacteria and the right fungi down there to make it all work together.
100%. What's your thoughts on the, well, I don't know what exactly you call them, but like the aerator and the aerators, the ranch works, all those to help break up the soil? Does that damage it a lot, or is it not really a
Well,
harmful damage?
I mean, are we talking hay fields and stuff like that?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
yeah, primarily my customers with that.
I probably get 5 to 10 emails a week from guys, hey, hay fields, whatever, and it just doesn't produce like it used to, and that's where we would have to almost somehow find a way to inject mycorrhiza into their soil and get that soil and that fungi and that sponge back in their soil and get it loosened up. At that point, you don't have the aeration problems because that's really where your air is coming from. It comes down the roots, down the hyphae, everything, right? So I don't have a problem with aeration per se, as long as we're not just plowing that moldboard, plowing it, you know what I'm saying, and tearing
Yeah.
the heck out of it. But no, I think a little aeration never hurt nothing. I get all these guys that are saying, well, how do I get it in there? And I'm like, I don't know, because UV light kills it, so we can't just go out and broadcast it, unless we're going to hit it just perfect in the evening and broadcast it, and then we hit an inch rain, then it might work because it'll wash it into the ground. And that's what my turf guys do. They go on and put it on in the evening with just a sprayer, and then they turn their irrigators on overnight or sprinklers, whatever, and wash it into the ground, and phenomenal results. But what's the odds of that happening every time, right?
Got to bet on the rain, and this isn't the year for that.
No, not at all. But
I
yeah, we
did.
send it what's that?
I was going to say I did see, and this was a marketplace find, so you can laugh at me. I like looking.
I do too. I do too.
But it was just a pool type, I don't know, 500-gallon sprayer and it was for nitrogen, and I was halfway thinking like that'd work okay on Mycomax if I rented that out.
Right, right. But the one it would work good for, and what a lot of these guys are buying, is they don't want to buy these oddly priced nitrogen, right? So they're buying the Bionic, which is a multiple species bacteria that actually will go into the cells of the plant and suck in nitrogen out of the atmosphere, right? And then it becomes systemic. Even if it's a pasture and cows are eating it off, or you're mowing it or haying it or whatever, it doesn't matter. Once we get it in that plant, it will continue to be in that plant, right? So it's kind of a one-time shot, and you're going to get, 40 to 60 pounds of nitrogen a year off of that. So huge savings.
It's big time on that end, and I've had some interest on that already, and I'm still talking to some folks that are doing corn, so
Right.
I'm looking forward to just seeing how some of this works, because it's going to be really neat.
It is.
I know
Next
you've got
year,
plenty of.
we can connect up quick enough next year. I'd like to get it with some of your silage guys, because that we can get way more tonnage, because we get that big root system. We get bigger stalks, more leaves, bigger leaves, wider leaves, bigger ears, obviously. Just a big, healthy plant. So we get way more tonnage.
Okay. Yeah, that'll make a big difference. And this is silage on net farms if they go with it, which I think they're leaning that way.
Right.
But if they go with it, we'll see how it turns out, because I'm optimistic.
Right.
I think it'll do a lot of good, and I know it'll save a bunch of money on the flip sides.
Right.
Should be a lot of positive. Now that I'm done chasing squirrels for the minute, because you haven't given me, they haven't helped me down those paths right for a second. So you've kind of gotten into this with me before. What's the difference, if you don't mind explaining the difference in mycorrhizal and the other biologicals that are out there? Because there's different ones. This is considered what, an AMF? Did I say that right?
Yep. Our
AMF.
mycorrhizal fungi. Yep.
Okay. So if you don't mind, could you give us some of that information?
I think the big thing, like I said, it's kind of the Wild West in the old biology, and I got a ton of farmers saying, "Oh, I've tried this, I've tried that, I didn't see nothing, I didn't," and they're just getting frustrated, right? And I think that all stems back to the low quality control. Maybe you got one or two species instead of, ours is 8. Most other AMF products out there I see are 1 or 2, maybe 3 species. Very low spore count. I don't know how they make them. We make ours in vivo, which is a very, very sophisticated and high-tech way of doing it. So I don't know how they make theirs, but it's really about quality and getting a diverse set of species and getting a lot of them, right? Concentration. Like you haven't seen our packs yet because we direct mail, but a little pack like this will cover 80 acres. millions and millions of spores is basically all we're putting out there, right? And that's all we need. That's what we need in our soil. So very concentrated, very diverse. I think there's a lot of guys that are just chasing money, right? For lack of a better term. You know, you get these big investors out of California or wherever, and they get this bright idea, or somebody brings them this idea that they're going to make this bacteria product and sell it to every farm in the world. And, you know, you've heard advertising, I'm sure, from a lot of them, right? I'm a small guy up here in North Dakota. I don't have the big advertising budget, but we have very quality products. I see their products come across, and I'm like, okay, 2 species, low spore count, probably not going to do a whole lot, right? So then what happens is, some guy I go to and he's like, hey, I tried that AMF stuff, whatever, it didn't work, right? Well, you didn't really try a good one, right? So there's different levels, and you really got to know that you got to, if they don't have a certificate of analysis and they can't show you that this is what's in it, I'd be pretty leery, to be honest. Because there's only a few companies like myself out there that will hand that to you and go, here you go. This is what's in it. Call the lab, verify it, whatever you want to do. If they can't do that, they're probably a little shady, right? And there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
So.
And I think that's important to note. It really is.
Right.
I talked to a drone friend of mine that's well, a friend now, but a drone guy out in Utah, and we had that conversation on the organic side. You know, obviously trying to protect the interest of your clients. You want to make sure that you have that certificate of analysis. You want to have that guaranteed, and
right.
he was carrying that pretty heavy when I spoke with him last. So what's not best case, not worst case, what's going to be our average, what's going to be our almost average long-term play with this, and not our top tier going, holy
right.
cow, I can't believe this stuff, but definitely not the,
okay.
you know.
Yeah, no, fair question. I mean, that's kind of what you want to know. I mean, what average is going to happen, okay? Well, what I like to do is I like to go in, and if we can, and get a soil test, and I'm not talking just for your NP and K. I'm talking biology as well, so I can see your fungi to bacteria ratio. Because as we know, that should be pretty close to 1-to-1, and most of the times it is so out of whack, it's not even funny. So we go in there. After that, we'll put some fungi, and maybe if they need some beneficial bacteria with it, we'll do the Mycomax Plus, because that does have the bacteria. And year 1, we'll go out, and you'll see the bigger roots, obviously, in the healthier plants. You know, bushels, you know, on corn, say 8 to 12 average, right? But this year it's kind of switched on us to, maybe it's not all about bushels. Maybe it's more about how much fertilizer money can I save, right? Because that's huge. We save a ton on the leaching, right? You know, everybody knows you 40 to 60% of what you put in the ground you're probably actually getting. So if we can get that to 70 or 80%, that's a pretty big number, right? So that's what we're trying to do, is we're going to limit that leaching, get more nitrogen to the plant naturally. We're going to unlock a bunch of phosphorus and get that to the plant naturally. It automatically is going to bring in more potassium and micronutrients and water, right? So it's really kind of switched from how many bushels can I get to how much can you save me, right? So you think, you know, 15 pounds of potassium, 30 pounds of phosphorus, and, you know, if we do the Mycomax and Bionic, then you're looking at 60, 70 pounds of nitrogen. That's a pretty darn big bill that we're saving for $28 an acre. Right? So that's really where this year has been the big push. Now on beans, we'll normally see, you know, somewhere in that 4 to 6 bushels on beans. So
is the Haney test the only one that you can use to get that?
Haney, the regen, there's getting to be a lot, and like I said, we're actually going to offer one in about the next 2 months. It's going to be on our website, where we want to give the power back to the farmer, right? Because we get kicked out of co-ops trying to save money on fertilizer, right? Co-ops want to sell their fertilizer, right? So we want to give the power back to the farmer and say, hey, you've got 5 minutes, go out and get me 12 plugs around your little field over here. You can print the label right off of our website, stick it on there, send it in. We'll do a full DNA test, and we'll tell you what you need for biology. We'll tell you what the co-op would tell you your NP and K. We're also going to tell you, well, if you put this biology in, this is what you need for NP and K, and it's going to be a heck of a lot lower, right?
Man, that's going to be pretty huge.
Right.
Is that going to be working with a lab out your way, or are you going to be working?
Actually, that lab will be out of Reno, Nevada.
Okay.
Yep. I actually go down there the end of this month.
I like it.
We invested a lot into it, but I think it's really going to be a game changer and show these guys this biology is not a joke. If we do it right and we have quality products, it's huge.
Yeah, when you can really break that down on the investment people make on, and when you start talking about DNA, so you're feeding exactly what crop you're growing, which they do that pretty well now. You can get stuff, but when you're able to say, hey, we can, add the fungi back into it, now all of a sudden we are, looking at growing a different crop essentially just from the value add from the soil,
Yeah.
which is a pretty cool conversation to be having.
And when we look at the DNA test of the soil, we're looking at which microbes do you have? What's their DNA? What do they do? How do we maximize them? Maybe you've got really good microbes, but you only have a very few of them. So we'll reproduce those, give them back to you next spring and say, get this in this field. It's going to unlock a lot of that tied up nutrients and save you a bunch on fertilizer, right? So that's the goal in this, is because you think of anybody that's been no-till and cover cropping for 30 years, their soil is completely different than the guy that's just out conventional tilling and doing it the way the co-op wants you to do it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you have seen the numbers on like the bottom ground creek ground where the cows have been the entire, since Grandpa had the farm back in the 70s.
Yep, completely different. Completely. So we know what good ground is supposed to have. We just know that 99% of the farm fields don't have it.
That's some good pieces there. That's pretty intriguing. I'm excited to see what that looks like with moving forward and having those to pull those biologicals on the soil test. Because the Haney is, I think, the only one I have dealt with. Maybe Regen once.
Regen, Haney. There's getting to be a few more that are kind of dabbling in it. Earth Optics has got some program too. There's a few of them now. They're getting there.
Well, let's talk about how you put this stuff on. This is one of those things that for me, when we first started talking, it was, well, it has to make sense for guys to be able to get this onto the seed and into the ground,
right,
without having to do a bunch of extra equipment, because such a large percentage of my customers are working day jobs and then coming home and farming at night and aren't really wanting to spend the time or the money on new equipment. But hey, if we can go make a one pass, we're good.
And that's true. And that's another reason we have the product line we have, right? So we're set up for guys, if they run liquid in furrow or a tea in furrow or a starter fertilizer or something, all you do, dump ours in with it and go. There's nothing special, just go. We have a seed treatment version. That's it's our ST version, obviously. We can put that in a liquid. We can run it on through a drum roller treater. If you've got your own little 12 little treater at home, we can run it through that way. Whatever's easiest for you, we're set up. We've got a talc graphite bucket from Meristem that's got our Mycomax in it. So if you got a Pro Box corn, you just dump it in there and put it in the planter, and away you go. We try and make it so easy you'd be stupid not to use it. You know what I'm saying? Because we're set up for however you're set up.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive the amount of different options down through there, right. Including, and you didn't throw it out by name, but I will. But I think it's really helpful having a little micro pack where you can, you got all your little micro minerals right there in it.
Right.
Going into the ground, I think that's a big deal as well. It's just one,
Bionic, which is the nitrogen fixing, that can either go in furrow or foliar with, say, your first pass of herbicide or whatever. So we can put it right with it, spray it on. Once it hits them leaves, those little bacteria go right inside the cells of the plant, and you're done. It's there all year sucking in nitrogen.
What's the most common mistake that producers make when trying the biologicals for the first time?
I don't know. It's tough to say common mistake. I think guys are just so trained into doing what they're doing. I don't know what the most common mistake would be. Maybe buying an inferior product, because that's what the sales told them. And then they get a bad taste in their mouth, and then they don't want to try anything else. But
that's really a fair point.
And another thing I see a lot with this biologicals is, say a guy, he's into it, he understands it, so he goes and buys a little bit of product over here, and he buys a little bit over here, and a little bit over, and a little bit over here, and he puts it all together, and he goes down and thinks he's got the perfect combo, and maybe it works, and he goes, crap, well, which one actually worked, right? Testing it, having a check strip where half the field's treated and half not, then at least right? I think that's a common mistake that some guys make where they're trying so many things they don't isolate one to see which one's actually working.
Yeah, that makes sense because I can 100% see that, and then they're still 3 years out figuring it out.
Right. Right.
So as you know, most of well, I don't know if most of my listeners, but definitely most of my seed customers are forage based.
Yeah.
So where does AMF fit into their world? And I do sell some seed corn, and I sell a lot of winter annuals.
Okay.
But where does AMF going to fit on a primarily forage based operation?
Right. Well, we sell to a lot of cover crop companies, which is a lot of forage type stuff. The reason for that is those cover crops will produce and reproduce that mycorrhiza in your soil. So if we're going to go out and put a forage on, we put it on before we put it in the ground, and then those spores are there, right? So I got guys up here that'll put it on their rye every fall as a cover crop, and then plant their beans right into it because then the mycorrhiza is already there, right? So many different advantages to it. Obviously, the bigger roots, the healthier soil, unlocking the nutrients. If you've got say forage peas or some kind of legume or something that's grabbing in for you, to have that on there, have that bigger roots, you're going to get way more nodulization, which means next year's crop's going to get what? A lot more nitrogen, right? Mm-hmm. So totally a ton of different things that go with it. Obviously you're getting a much healthier plant as well, which translates to the nutrition of your animals. You got to think about that aspect too. I had guys that run silage and run 4,000 or 5,000 head of Holsteins, and they said the nutrition using your product is phenomenal compared to the way we used to do it.
Hey, and that is exactly right. You can make or break growing your animals based on how nutrient dense your forages are.
That's right.
That or you're going to be buying a whole lot of grain.
That's right. Exactly.
So your best simple rule of thumb for your for either your products or any biological, what's the best rule of thumb that you would give someone implementing this?
I would say leave a check strip and dig roots. Those two. You will visually see from the road a difference in the plant, and when you dig roots, your eyes will pop out of your head. Seriously. Then you know what it's doing. You can see what it's doing, and you can plan accordingly after that.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep.
So we know what's coming up in the next 2 months. What's coming in the next next 5 years for new age farming?
Well, I think for us right now, we've got the Mycomax or the fungi line nailed in. There's not a company out there that even holds a candle to us, so we're pretty locked in there. We're always looking for more species, more beneficial type species. I think for us now, once we get this DNA machine ready and going, it's going to be adding not only the nitrogen fixing bacteria, it's going to be adding the P solubilization bacteria, which is huge with all this phosphorus we've got locked up, right? As well as other beneficial microbes that we may have killed or whatever in our soil. I think we're just going to add a little bacteria line that's going to really open up that soil and open up them channel ways to get these nutrients to our plants and really help these guys with fertilizer efficiency is what it's all about. And that's my goal is, instead of paying through the nose for this fertilizer every year, let's build your soil and invest in our soil so you have to pay half that in 5 years. Now, hopefully, the fun thing about me, there's an end game to this plan, right? We get that bacteria to fungi ratio around that 50-50 or hovering one way or another. We get all the right beneficial bacteria in there. You probably don't need to use me unless you're going to go rip up your land and you're probably done once you get your soil functioning right. So there is an end game. I don't need to work with you forever. I just need to work with you until your soil's right.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note on a quality product because that's what you're getting out of, hey, we're working with soil structure. We're talking about working with soil structure versus actually just selling you a foliar input or whatever the case may be. And there is a lot of that, and I don't mean to put down any product because that's not what I'm here to do, but when you can do things the way it was or the way it was intended to work, it allows for a lot more a lot more left over at the end of it. And that can go anything from utilizing cattle on your ground, whether they're grazing corn fodder. I don't know. Is that a thing in North Dakota as well as
No,
it is in the Midwest?
no, not so much. Well, not in the eastern half of North Dakota. Eastern half is 100% farm or row crop, basically.
Okay, but where you can put manure down and you have the hoof traffic without beating your field to death. There's two different things there. I don't want to
Right.
get anybody confused.
Right.
And then you have the other side of if you are able to put manure down somewhere in there where you were talking about your winter annuals. I was also thinking about the utilization that the mycorrhizal should be able to get from your cover crops that grew over the winter if you put it down with them. So if you put down an 4, 5, 10 way, doesn't matter, cover crop, and outside of the brassicas, this is going to be able to help store these nutrients and all this.
All of it, yeah.
Yeah, and I had a great conversation with a guy this spring who had planted a bunch last year, and his whole thing was, he was like, well, how much did I get from my chicken litter? I put down this much, and how much did I put down? And I did the math with him. We worked through it, Anyway, and, he was going to get 30% of his chicken litter that he put down this spring.
Right.
But then through till Labor Day, he'd had all of it.
Yep.
Well, think about a product like this, and the same thing for his cover crop. If he allowed it, which I don't know if he did, I think he got antsy and planted his corn.
Right.
But if he'd allowed his cover crop, he'd have had pulled 200 units of nitrogen from there, and he wouldn't even have needed the Bionic. He would have been able to get by with just a mycorrhizal, and that would have been, so stuff like that where you can do so much of this stuff in the as close to natural way as possible without spending just a massive amount of money, which is what it is right now with your fertilizer bills.
And that's kind of my belief. If we can get our soil somewhat close to the way the good Lord and Mother Nature made them and function correctly, our fertilizer bills will be hardly anything.
Yeah, it made a big deal. And just what you said, if we can manage this ground without compacting the heck out of it, and we're allowing the fungi to work, we're allowing these things to work, all of a sudden we don't need to no-till, and we just have roots all the way to the bottom. Some of my, I won't say, some of the more fascinating pictures to me in my, with the seed side specifically, is the ones where they show the cover crops and, some of it's got the soil just dripping off of it where it's like nothing there, versus the real deep. So when I'm thinking about digging plants, especially getting into sorghum Sudan, which the gentleman you mailed that package to, that's what he's going. And I'm like, this is going to be a massive root on this. Like, this is going to be beyond anything I'm digging. I hope he's got a little bit of a backhoe down there, a mini X, because I don't want to dig that deep. But it should throw out a massive root.
Yeah. And if you think about it, I don't care what you do, more chemicals are not going to fix soils. Roots are going to fix soils. Okay? That's just the way it's going to work.
If chemicals didn't burn, you wouldn't have to wear PPE.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Which is terrible. But, Brady, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down. I know it's springtime and things are rolling and all those things, but I appreciate you sitting down with us and just clarifying some of the biologicals questions, because like I said, it's almost I know some podcasts will end it like asking just a random question, and this has become almost the question that gets talked about because of the price of fertilizer, and because essentially this podcast was for dealers to be able to talk to other dealers or people in ag service, and that's the same question that all of us are getting asked by our customers. So it helps to really be able to break that down.
Well, I hope it helped, because I know there's a lot that goes around and out there, and guys are confused and whatever. So I hope I helped somebody anyway.
Guys, follow Brady at New Age Farming on Facebook. He's got a lot of information on his website as well. He's very generous with his knowledge, as far as he sent me an hour worth of YouTube and radio spots. So I have absolutely listened to those and some of them multiple times because this is all well beyond my 8th grade education here. That's a little bit of a joke, but guys, none of it's going to replace, good management, but this is a great tool to put in that tool belt to understand how it can work and how it can tie into what you're doing. The soil sampling, I can't stress it enough. Pulling those soil samples to know where you are. Another quick question, Brady. When you pull a soil sample in the spring before you put the mycorrhizal down, and if you pulled another one, let's say April and September, can you see a difference in that just from putting that down or not
100%.
Without adding?
100% you will.
Okay. Yeah, because it makes sense that it's bringing it back up and making it available.
You'll see a difference in the nutrients level, and then when you look at your bacteria to fungi numbers, you'll see your fungi going up.
So, hey, there we go. And I'm sorry I forgot to ask that earlier because that's one I've been sitting on for a week and I had been thinking about it. So if you're looking to improve your nutrient uptake, build soil health, or stretch your fertility dollar, this conversation gives you a great place to start. And thank you for tuning in to Around the Fence Post, and we will see you next time.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope something we shared helped you, challenged you, or gave you a new perspective. If even one moment stood out, please share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. That's how this community grows, one conversation at a time. You can find us as Around the Fence Post on Facebook and Wet Meadows Seed on Facebook and Instagram. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next time, Around the Fence Post.